Welcome to Medication Administration Training 2018. To begin, you'll need a few documents. The first one is the Shares Inc. Medication Policy. Next, you'll need the Principles of Administering Medication handout. You'll also need a Medication Administration training form to record that you've done this training. For the competency test, you'll need a medication sign-in, sign-out sheet. You'll also need a medication administration record, also known as a MAR. You'll need a controlled substance record and a community outing medication administration record, also known as a COMAR. To get started, please take out your training experience report form or training form. You can begin filling in your name and the date. And then towards the middle of the form, it says time involved in training. There you can put your start time of your training. Please include AM or PM. Now that you've partially completed your training experience form, please get out the Shares Inc. Medication Policy. The PowerPoint slides that we are about to go through goes through the medication policy and just highlights some things in there that we would like for you to know. You can follow along by looking at your Shares Inc. medication policy or just follow the information on the slides that you're about to see.
Staff qualifications and training. Only staff trained in medication administration will handle and dispense medication. So that includes being trained in this presentation that we're doing today, as well as 4A and 4B. And people that can be trained for this are production supervisors, living skills instructors, program managers, and plant managers. The trainings have to be done initially upon hire and also annually. That is a CARF standard. And the training is done by the social services staff.
Participant record keeping. Shares Inc. is responsible for maintaining an up-to-date list of all medications, including both prescription medications and non-prescription medication. Shares keeps this list in File Center. If you have questions about medications that a participant is taking, you can ask your plant manager, program manager, or service coordinator or social worker. Up-to-date medical information is important in case of an emergency during programming hours. We also can print off face sheets from File Center that contains medical information that emergency responders would need in the event of an emergency. The list is maintained either on agency forms or copies from residential providers.
Documentation of medication use. All administration of medications are going to be documented on one of the following forms. So it could be documented on the MAR, which stands for Medication Administration Record. It could be documented on the Controlled Substance Record. Could be documented on the COMAR, which stands for Community Outing and Medication Administration Record, or on the PRN sheet. And PRN just stands for as needed medication, so that would be things like Tylenol, Advil, Motrin. The medication consent form. We have to have consent for any medication that we administer here at Shares. So we have to have a parent, guardian, emancipated participant, a residential provider's signature on that consent form. We are not able to deviate from the consent form. We require consent for any kind of medication, whether it be long-term, short-term, PRN, or over-the-counter. And then changes in medication or dosage require a new consent form. So for example, if we change from 8 milligrams of something to 4 milligrams, we would have to have a new consent form. What information will you find on the consent form? You're going to find information like permission to administer the medication, the name of the person to whom the medicine will be administered. The specific name of the medication should be listed on there. So we're looking things for names like Tylenol, aspirin, ibuprofen. We don't want general things like pain reliever or antacid. We want the specific name off of the bottle of medicine. Dosages to be given, times to be given, reason for giving the medication, the prescribing physician, the number of days authorized if it's a short-term medicine, and then at the bottom of the consent form, there's a little section where people can withdraw consent to administer the medication.
Some participants are able to administer their medications themselves during programming hours. Shares will not assume responsibility for monitoring, storage, or administration for these individuals. This information is found on the annual consent form. And so if you have questions about individuals that can take their own medicine during programming hours, you can ask a plant manager, a program manager, or the service coordinator or social worker at your facility.
Medications will be transported and delivered to shares by residential staff, participant, parent, or guardian. Medication labeling and packaging. So for prescription medication, the things that we need are the original packaging, the doctor's name, the pharmacist's name, the name of the individual that will be receiving the medication, the name of the medication, the dosage, and the time to be administered. For non-prescriptive medication and over-the-counter medication, it needs to be in the original packaging with the original label. Inventory. Staff trained in medication administration are responsible for signing in and maintaining the inventory of all medications. So that is this form right here. This helps us to be accountable for the medications that we have signed in. So, for example, in Greenfield, I know sometimes there's discrepancies with residential providers about how much medication we should have. So this helps us to keep track of how much we should have and show them, you brought this amount on this day, we've given these days. So it just helps us with that accountability. Staff responsible for administering the medication will complete the notification of low inventory form when there is a 5-day supply of medication left. So that is this. This may be new for you guys. At CARF last year, they wanted to know how we notify people when we're running low on medication, so that is when we developed this form. So that is sent out when there's a 5-day supply of the medication remaining. You know, if you've sent it out, you haven't gotten anything, you're down to maybe 3 days, maybe send it out again. If you're getting down to the wire, let Grace know so she can contact the appropriate people. Security and storage. All medications, including prescription and over-the-counter, are stored in a locked file cabinet or container at the appropriate locations on premises. Some medications need to be in a refrigerator or light-free environment, and then controlled substances should be locked and counted daily. So even if the person is absent, we should be counting controlled substances. Handling and disposal of medication. If you ever have damaged medication, you want to save that and place it in an envelope with the participant name, date, time, medication name, and what happened with it, and then we'll return it to the appropriate person. Disposal of all biohazards will follow the Shares Inc. Hazard Communication Program found in the Shares Inc. Safety Manual, which I believe is located in the Plant Manager office. Expired, unused, or discontinued medication will be returned in its original container to the staff, parent, guardian, or participant, and then signed out on the appropriate form. Off-site use. Medications that are taken outside of the agency premises should be signed out by the staff responsible for the community activity. and then documentation will be done on the COMAR and then attached to the MAR upon return from the outing. So anytime that you're filling out a COMAR, you want to make sure it gets with the MAR so that it can be filed.
Medication-related incidents. In case of an error, the social worker or service coordinator will contact the appropriate person and get subsequent directions that we should follow. So, for example, should we continue to administer the medication even though we're administering it late? Or should we not administer the medication at all? Program staff will have access to emergency phone numbers, including the Poison Control Center's phone number. Those phone numbers are located at different places in different facilities, so ask the service coordinator at the facility that you're at where you can find that phone number. All errors will be recorded on the MAR along with the physician's directions and subsequent treatment necessary. Errors will be reported in accordance with BDDS, which is the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services, reporting requirements. Medication errors are reviewed quarterly amongst the plant manager, program managers, social worker, service coordinator, and director of support services so that we can try to figure out ways to prevent medication errors.
Medication reactions experienced by the participants and observed by staff will be immediately reported to the social worker or service coordinator and recorded on the agency's incident report form. The social worker or service coordinator will notify the appropriate person so that we can determine what to do.
And this completes the Shares Inc. medication policy. Now we'll be moving right along to the Principles of Administering Medication handout. Principles of administering medication are like best practices, so they're things that we should be doing as we administer medication. Feel free to pull out this handout and follow right along through the PowerPoint.
In this area, the principles of administering medication. First of all, preparing and administering medications requires staff to be diligent at all times. Proper handling and dispensing of medications ensures that an individual is receiving the correct medication. Guidelines must be followed in the event that a medication is not given at the correct time or a medication needs to be destroyed. Be aware of the guidelines for controlled substances, storing medications, and maintaining a sterile, clean environment. Preparing and administering medications. Medication sheets, medication logs, or the MAR, are used to record each individual's medication. Medication should be checked 3 times prior to administration. First, when you're looking at the bottle. Next, when you're administering or pouring the medication. Or even after pouring the medication, make sure it's all correct. Charting should never be done before you hand out a medication, only after. Never chart until you've given that medication. Some general considerations: wash your hands, work alone, avoid distractions. Do not leave medications unattended during preparation. Read that label 3 times. Ensure the information on the MAR corresponds exactly to the label on the medication. Make sure you're giving the right thing. You never administer a medicine from an unlabeled or illegibly labeled container. Never relabel a medication yourself. Medications can be given within 1/2 hour of the prescribed time. We had looked at extending that to 1 hour, from 1 hour before and 1 hour after. But we looked at several medications, and you never know which one has to be done right on time. So instead of giving us an hour each way, we kept the policy 1 hour, half hour before, half hour after, because it could be dependable on what medication you're giving out. Certain things have to be done right on time. Check the expiration date. Do not give outdated or discolored drugs. The one that sneaks up on us, and not truly sneaks up, is we have an EpiPen. And even though we don't use that EpiPen, that thing expires. And so that's one of those important ones that we watch. We watch all our drugs, but never give outdated or discolored drugs. Precautions. Identify the individual while he or she swallows the medication. Do not leave the medications for individuals to use later. Always check the medication sheet to make sure that the medication hasn't already been given. That's very important here. We have more than one person who hands out medications, which is a good thing, but at the same time, just make sure you're not double giving that dose to a person. Medication must be given by the person who pours it. If an individual expresses doubt or concern about a dosage or medication, you must make certain that no mistake has occurred, as the individual can be right. Check it out. Find out what their concern is. Compare the original's physician's order with the label of the medication. If there is still doubt, check with the social worker or service coordinator. Observe for any undesirable effects of the medications. If you notice any symptoms or hear any complaints that are unusual, check with the service coordinator before administering more medication to that individual. Remember that side effects may occur several hours after the medication has been given. Omitted or refused drugs. Omission of a medication should be reported as soon as it's discovered. We can determine if the dose should still be given. Check with me. When an individual refuses medication, you must listen to the reason. If it is a refusal due to nausea or other possible adverse effects, check with the service coordinator. We're not here just for them to say, no, I don't want that. We're here to educate them, to help them understand that refusal may lead to something, a medical emergency, an outcome, and that person really needs to be educated on why they're taking that med at that time if there's a refusal. We're just not going to say, oh, it's your right to say no. Yes, ultimately it is, but it's also our job to make sure they understand why they're taking the med. If a medication is omitted due to refusal, chart it on the medication sheet and chart the reason for refusal and your notification of the service coordinator. Sometimes the individual is away from the facility. When the individual is away from the facility, medications are sent along. Medications are prepared for each scheduled time of administration, packaged, labeled, and sent with the individual. Our 6 rights. It's something that you've heard over the years, and it's still the same. This is a good one to remember. Right medication, right dose, right individual, the right route, the right time, and the right documentation. Violation of any of the 6 rights may result in a medication error. These can be caused by lack of concentration, lack of knowledge, failure to follow correct procedure, poor communication, or even performing a job beyond your scope of duty. Truthfully reporting an error may be less harmful because it can be handled immediately. This is for the participants' sake. The situation will be reviewed and similar errors will be tried to be avoided and will be avoided in the future. The first thing you do if you discover medication errors, you report it to the service coordinator, and then we will notify the physician and receive directions. The service coordinator will tell you to observe the individual and complete an incident report. Always observe the individual for undesirable effects. Review the medication side effects for desired action, adverse effects, and toxic effects. One thing that I think that we all realize and know, this is general symptoms. Nausea, vomiting, difficult breathing, dizziness, itching or hives, drowsiness. All those areas, I think, it's just like a real key. If something's along those lines happening with the individual that's out of the ordinary, unusual, that needs to be reported. Record and report all information that is important and pertinent to the individual's care. Med errors. We're going to always be using incident report. It must be completed by whoever is the most familiar with the situation. Usually the person who committed or discovered the error. Incident reports are reviewed periodically by the agency incident review committee, who designs and plans that will avoid future incidents. Answer all of the questions on the incident report form. You see here, that's just the top part right there. Typically those we'll look at that in a minute. The boxes that are outlined in red are typically your part. There's a whole bottom portion that's completed by a social worker. Controlled substances. We have an individual that takes controlled substances. And we're also hearing on the news, I won't say the word.
Opioids.
Opioids. I've not been able to say it 6 times. So, they have to be double locked. And this is a controlled substance on our property, so therefore it is double locked. The meds are in a locked box in the locked cabinet. Controlled substances need to be counted daily, even if the person is here. And as we've already said, we don't do it on weekends, but we should be doing it every day. Shares and federal guidelines require accountability forms to record the use of these substances. Storage. Cabinet must be locked when not in use. Topical medications, those for instillation, may be stored separately from oral medication to avoid contamination. What we have here is that we do have one cream. That cream is stored separately from the medications. It's actually in her file folder, so that it's kept away to help avoid contamination. Some medications must be refrigerated or stored away from light. In our county, we do not have that. We did in the past, several years ago, but not recently. And that was just for a temporary. Key points. Labels should be clean and readable. If not, let us know. Do not relabel something yourself. Never administer a medication that's from an unreadable label. Keep medications tightly capped, so that if the bottle falls over, the pills don't get spread all over the place. Do not use outdated medications. I think the area that's the strongest point on this one happens to be our EpiPen. It's not used, but it is dated. Even though it's a very expensive med and it just drives the family crazy, but it's every year. We have to remind the family to replace that EpiPen. Report any changes of inconsistency, color, or odor, and do not administer. Following agency policy for receiving and discontinuing medications, transfer of medications when leaving, disposal of contaminated or unused medication, and what to do when an individual refuses medication. Refer to our medication policy for these practices.
In the next section of this training, we will go through the forms that are used for documentation of medication administration training. You may not have all of these forms printed out, and that's okay. They will be shown to you on the slides that are to come. The first form that we'll look at is the Community Outing Medication Administration Record, also known as the COMAR. There are directions at the bottom of the form, so if you ever have questions about how to complete the form, please refer to the instructions at the bottom. You'll use this form anytime that you've marked P for PACT on the MAR or Medication Administration Record. So once again, you'll use this form anytime that you mark a P for packed on the MAR. At the top, the staff that's packaging the medication will write in the date, the participant name, the name of the medication, the dosage of the medication, and the time that the medication is to be administered. And then they will sign down at the bottom where it says staff packaging medication. The person that's taking this COMAR on the outing with them will administer the medication and then get out the COMAR and initial where it says administering staff initials, and then they'll sign at the bottom where it says staff administering medication. Once this form is completed and you return from your outing, you'll want to make sure that you return this form so that it can be attached to the MAR and be filed into File Center at the end of the month.
The next form is the controlled substance record form. At the top, you'll want to put the participant name, month, and year, the medication name, the dosage, and the time, and then there is a spot at the top for the starting count of the medication. So at the beginning of the month, you just want to see what your count is and list it up at the top. The column on the left-hand side says date, and then it has numbers under it. Those numbers do correspond with the days of the month. So today is the 23rd, so you would find the 23 and then fill out across from the 23. You can code either in the time column or the amount given column. So for example, if somebody is absent today on the 23rd, you may put the administration time is noon, comma, A to indicate they're absent, or you could put it in the amount given column where you put 0 and then put comma A. At the bottom, there is a little cheat sheet for the codes that you can use on the form. So, for example, A is absent, E is error, W is weekend, and so forth. Note on the form that it does require your full signature and not just initials. This is the MAR, or Medication Administration Record. So on this form, at the top, you'll put the participant name and the schedule. The schedule means when do they take the medicine. So is it like daily or Monday through Friday? Is it just Wednesday? And then you can also put the time up there, but there is a time spot down at the bottom as well. Put the month and year. You'll want to list the medications and the dosages of the medications, and then the next column is where you can put the time that the medication is to be administered. So in these boxes on this sheet, if you're administering the medication on the 23rd, which is today, you'd go to that column, you would put your initials that the medication was administered. If it was packed for a community outing or taken on a community outing, you would put P for packed in that box. If there are 2 medications listed on the sheet, you have to initial on the top box and the bottom box. You cannot initial one time to cover 2 medications, so you'll have to initial next to both. Down at the bottom, sign your name just one time and put your initials one time. That indicates to us whose initials go with what person. The medication sign-in, sign-out sheet. If you notice up at the top, there is a line with an apostrophe S in medications. That's where you put the participant's name. And then you'll want to list the date, the dosage, name, and time of the medication, the amount on hand, so how many do we have in our cabinet. The amount signed in is staff bringing in 10 pills. You would put 10 pills there. Signed out is staff taking any medication outside of the building, and then what's the final amount that we have. And then the share staff will sign, and whoever is bringing in the medication will sign. So that could be residential staff, it could be a participant if the participant's bringing the medication. This is the PRN Medication Administration Record, or MAR. PRN stands for as needed, so this would be things like Tylenol, ibuprofen. Pretty much contains the same information. However, if you notice in the top right-hand area, there is a place to put the expiration date of the PRN medication. And this is just to try to help you know when it expires so that we're not giving expired medication.
There is one, I just thought of this, one requirement on this form that once you administer a PRN to someone or a Tylenol, you need to go back an hour later and check for the effect, if the medication was effective or not. And that's that last portion, the last 2 columns.
Next is the notification of low inventory form. So this is the form that you send out when you have the 5-day supply remaining. There are just a few blanks that you have to fill in. Most of it is filled in for you. So you want to put the date where it says date. And then the first blank is to put the participant's name. The second blank is to say how many days worth of medication do they have remaining. So if we're sending out on the 5th day, they should have a 5-day supply remaining. And then the last blank is for the name of the medication. And then staff would sign at the bottom and send it home with the participant. The next form is the incident report form. If you notice, it does look a little bit different. We have changed and updated this form. It is now in File Center. There is nothing different on it for you guys that you have to fill out. You guys are still filling out the same information that you've always filled out. So it's just this top section until you get to that first line. The bottom 2/3 of the form is for the service coordinator to fill out. So it's no different for you guys.
This slide lists all of the forms that are associated with medication administration that we have gone over in previous slides. Here are a few questions that we've gotten from staff after this training. First, if a person leaves for an appointment prior to their medication administration time, what do we put on the MAR? If a person is absent at the time that you're administering a medication, you would put A for absent on the MAR. If the person that's coming to pick up the participant wants medication to take with them to give to them while at an appointment, for example, in that case, you could complete the sign-in, sign-out sheet, sign out 1 pill to the residential staff, and then on the MAR, you would mark them absent because they were absent at the assigned medication administration time. Next question. Someone takes multiple medications, so do I need to complete 2 COMARs? The answer is no. You only need to complete 1 COMAR. List all of the medications that that person will be taking on the outing. Next, do I have to include a controlled substance on the MAR as well as on the controlled substance record? The answer is no, you do not have to list controlled substances on the MAR. Some people that come from residential backgrounds may have done that in previous jobs. However, SHARE's policy does not require that to happen. So you can list substances that are not controlled on the MAR and then the controlled substances on the controlled substance record. If you have any other questions that have not been answered throughout this PowerPoint, please speak with your social worker or service coordinator to get them answered.
We're gonna go do a scenario together and have you guys fill out some of the medication administration documentation. So we're gonna do we're working with Sally Smith, and Sally is prescribed 3 medications. The time that we are to administer these medications is
12 o'clock p.m. every day. She takes Carafate 1 gram, Buspar 15 milligrams, and lorazepam 5.5 milligrams. The lorazepam is a controlled substance. On January 12th, her residential staff brought in 12 pills of the Buspar. She already had 3 in the cabinet. So if you guys could take out your sign-in, sign-out sheet and fill this in for Sally. You're signing in the Buspar for her. Okay, yeah, as long as there's a name at the top. The date is January the 12th of 2018. The name of the med is Buspar. It's 15 milligrams, and you're going to administer it at noon. You already had 3 on hand. They brought you in 12. You didn't sign anything out to them, like you didn't return any meds to them. So your final count is 15, and then you'll sign your name, and then the other person will sign. We're getting a little bit more complicated. So now we're gonna document that we are administering these medications. So on January 12th, 15th, and 16th, you are giving Sally all 3 of her medications. So now you'll want to pull out the 2 MARs, because the lorazepam is a controlled substance. So you have to remember, you have to document on the controlled substance record. And if you would, at the top where it says starting count for the lorazepam, put 12. And so now you can, and then we'll go to the next part. But, and the 14th, the 13th and the 14th are weekends. so we'll just kind of go over the answers. Again, remember Sally Smith, the schedule is daily at noon, or you could put Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. It's, whatever words.
Right, it's almost time, not quite yet.
We're in January of 2018. You're gonna list the Buspar and its milligrams and the Carafate and its milligrams. The dose, the time that we are required to administer is noon. And so on the 12th, you administered and you initial, and then the 13th and the 14th are weekends, so you just code it with W's. The 15th and the 16th, you would administer again.
Yeah.
On the 17th, she was absent. On the 19th, you packed it, and on the 19th, you had an error. And so then, again, make sure at the beginning of the month, or any time you're administering for the first time, you're just documenting your signature and initials, and that way it'll correspond. We'll know, by looking at the bottom who, because you can have multiple staff names there. The controlled substance record, again, Sally Smith, January 18, lorazepam, 0.5 milligrams at noon. The beginning count is 12. On the 12th, you administered 1, so you had 11 remaining. The 13th and 14th were weekends. I was saying that you could even bring down the 11, all the way, but the 15th and the 16th you administered 1, so it's okay. Your counts are going to be we're having a little trouble. Maybe Grace, I probably can see from here. So on the 15th, your count was what, 9?
10.
10. Okay. On the 16th, your count was 9. On the 17th, that's when they were absent. So you stay at 9. On the 18th, I'll let you read because I cannot.
On the 18th, it was packed. It was packed, and then you have 8 left. And then on the 19th was an error, and you still have 8 left.
Yeah.
Signature, and you see it's a full signature. It's not initials on this particular form.
Okay, I put error in the time. I did too. And you put noon there. You got noon on all
It's
that.
okay.
Is it
I mean,
okay?
it is okay.
Mark it
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's okay. We just need to make sure that it's noted as it's an error. And then here is your COMAR. The date of the outing was January the 18th, and the participant is Sally Smith. You're going to write in all 3 medications with their dosage and time to be given. And this is you as you're signing this med out, for the other individual. And so like we talked about earlier, you may also be the one who is packing it and administering it, or it could be 2 different staff members. We updated some of the instructions at the bottom. So if you have any questions, we're always available. Because I know that not everybody does this on a daily basis, but.
Congratulations, you've reached the end of medication administration training. To finish up, please take out your medication administration training form and finish completing it. You'll need to mark the end time with AM or PM and then sign your name and date at the bottom. You'll also need to put your competency test forms with your training form. So those forms would include the medication sign in sign out sheet, the MAR, the controlled substance record, and the COMAR. Make sure your names are on all of the forms and hand it in to the social worker or service coordinator. If you have any questions remaining about medication administration training or about the competency test, please ask a social worker or service coordinator at your location.